Thanks, Michelle. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and mute everybody again, just so we can keep the feedback down. And my screen share is not working. Can you guys see the screen right now? Looks like a no.
Okay.
I am seeing the transition document.
Okay. I lost my little green box. So didn't know if I was sharing still. All right. So we'll get started and move through the document. First, we're starting with the table of contents. To kick off, we received notice from the state at different points late this summer with some different timetables of when we would need to move our billing for CLS, unlicensed CLS, to the new, well, back to the old H2015 code. So at that time, we started to envision what our CLS invoice system would look like across the region. One thing that we wanted to lend some consideration to was that we are the only region that uses a CLS invoice, and it's kind of set up a different system where our services are reimbursed a little bit differently than the rest of the state, the rest of the PHPs and CMHs. And what we wanted to do was align our billing systems a little bit more tightly with those systems or with those other payers. The other thing we wanted to do is future-proof a little bit. So there's a lot of talk of a lot of different systems and a lot of attention that's going to be paid to home help services, unlicensed CLS services, licensed residential, kind of into the future. And one of the acronyms that's thrown around a bit is EVV, electronic visit verification. There's been a couple delays in the implementation of that, but looking at something that's expected to definitely be on the horizon, we wanted to make sure that whatever changes we were making, we were going to at least think about some of these requirements that are coming down the road, with electronic visit verification being one of them. The other thing we wanted to do during this transition was to ensure that we could be as compliant with some of the electronic billing systems that exist that maybe we're not using currently as providers, but that are out there, and that we could move forward with better, I guess, interfaces with those types of systems. And so having a standalone CLS invoice system that requires entry within our Cricut system prevents a lot of those 830. I always forget the numbers on those, whichever ones you guys use. They might be 835.
837.
837. Thank you, Laura. So what we want to do is make sure we're future proofing related to that as well. So we heard from the state this summer that they were moving to a new direction. The other thing we had was a movement to some new modifiers that are related to shared services. So we'll cover through kind of what our solution ended up being, and what we're training on today and into the future. All right. So our initial transition is set for services that are delivered on or after October 1st. We did need to make a transition on this date. The state is no longer allowing the CPT code H0043 to be used for services delivered on or after October 1st. So with that, We went into revising what our billing system looks like, and trying to develop a transition document that we're hoping is easy to follow, even though we are asking for some additional work from you all as providers. We do feel there's some benefits to be gained, not just in the future, but immediately, especially around reimbursement timeframes. So with this transition, we started off showing you where the CMHPSM website, where we're going to share information there. We'll continue to share information there. If we have questions that come up during today's training or after today's training, we'll continue to post within a frequently asked questions document that we'll host there on the website. So this becomes our timeline. Realizing there's a lag in services, we built a bit of that into our timeline. We were hoping to have this done a little bit sooner, but with everything going on, it was kind of a mad dash here at the end to get everything out as far as the guidance. So what we're going to have is a 60-day kind of overlap of 2 different billing systems being able to be utilized, but they're going to be utilized for 2 different periods of claims. So services billed delivered up through September 30th will still be billed the traditional way through the CLS site plan and CLS invoice module. For all those services delivered after October 1st, we're going to be billing directly utilizing the H2015 or H201X CPT codes for authorizations. Moving forward, we're going to no longer be billing on staffing time, so it will be billed on the actual CPT code. That's what the claims will be built around. It won't be built around the hours of the staff were submitting within that CLS invoice. So with the modifier changeover, we'll zoom in a little bit. Our region will begin to start using the 5 modifiers indicated here on the screen. So for times where there's 2 individuals being served by 1 staff person, we're going to be using the modifier UN. For 3, UP, 4 individuals, UQ, and so on for UR and US. We ran some initial data, and there's not a lot of unlicensed CLS that exists for 4 individuals being served by 1 staff person, or 5 or 6. Most of our settings with that many people are more on the residential side, or in some of the other group based services. So with those modifiers, we have a couple of ideas as far as how you as providers would kind of track when those modifiers are appropriate to be utilized. And those modifiers will be utilized for both the H2015 and the T2027 as we move forward. Next up are our new reimbursement rates. So we're all on a increased provider premium pay scale right now. With that, we're continuing that. If you haven't heard as of yet, that has been approved through the state for the first quarter of fiscal year 21. So October through December is going to continue to be funded with the provider premium pay rates. We hope to hear news earlier rather than later from the state, but that's not always the case. So as of now, we're moving through October, November, and December with those premium pay rates, and those rates will be included within your contract or within the system as appropriate. One thing we did want to touch on is that we did increase the rates for the staffing situations where more individuals are served by one staff person. So it's a bit of a graduated scale in that instead of just dividing the 15-minute rate by 3, we're going to add another 5% to those rates for both the UP, UQ, UR, and US modifiers. So those will be a slightly increased rate over what they would typically be just by the math of dividing by the number of individuals served. At this point, we're moving forward with the same rates that we had in last year's contracts, and wherever we're going with provider premium pay. This is always moving targets. We're moving forward with those rates other than the modifier rates for UP, UQ, UR, and US, which are increasing. It's important to note that all of those CPT codes and rates and that all be included in your individual CMHSB provider contract. Moving on to provider service authorizations. It's important to note here that there's a new service that it sounds like there's still going to be some work to be done on across the state. We won't give you any, we won't go too far down the road of what we're thinking we might see related to this overnight health and safety service code. But there is some talks of even some changes into the future on that specific code. So right now we're starting with 2 authorization CPT codes that we can utilize, one being H201X. We're only going to use that H201X code for individuals that are on the C waiver. So they're either habilitation support waiver eligible, SED waiver eligible, or children. All right, sorry, my internet connection was unstable, so I went away for a minute. Apologies on that. All right, so we were talking about H201X. You'll see this authorization when the only when it's appropriate, so only when that individual qualifies for overnight health and safety and when they're on the C waiver, one of the C waiver programs. You'll see an H2015 authorization when an individual is maybe on the C waiver and not eligible for overnight health and safety, or they're not on the C waiver. So all of that will be taken care of through the CMH case manager. We'll have that information within Cricut, and the way for the provider to realize if an individual is covered for T2027 is through the H201X authorization, and it'll be listed in the individual's plan of service. So moving further through some of the explanations around this, we made a few other determinations as we were rebuilding the system. One of them is that we're going to not include home help hours within our billings anymore. We're going to have authorizations that are strictly related to the CLS that is to be delivered. We're still going to track home help hours, but that's going to be the big change for providers when billing, is that we're going to be, and we'll get to the billing a little bit later, so I won't go too far into it because Laura will have some better guidance, as she's much more in tune with the billing than I. But that's one thing that we wanted to note, is that while home help will be included in the CLS worksheet, it's going to be billed a little bit differently than it has in the past. Moving down through H2015, The H2015 authorization, we're just going to have the one authorization. And so everything will be billed based upon what's actually going on at the site. So that same H2015 code will be able to be used for all of the modifiers. So we won't have individual authorizations where you're chasing down an H2015 UN for a specific amount of services that were shared versus not shared. So all of those elements will be listed within the site plan information, within the CLS worksheet information, and within the IPOS itself. Beginning on October 1st, we are moving away from the CLS authorizations module that we had built, and we're renaming it the CLS worksheet. We'll get into the details a little bit about what's in the CLS worksheet as we move forward. The idea is that we will control the reimbursement for services based upon each of the service authorizations. So much like all of the other services. So if your agency delivers skill building or supported employment services or licensed residential, all of that reimbursement is tied directly to the services that are being authorized. We had a bit of a gap as we were reimbursing based upon a CLS invoice and site plan model. So we're moving forward with alignment with the rest of our services, which we're hoping will make things easier eventually. And we understand some of the consternation around this initial transition. All right. So looking at the CLS worksheet example, this is something that the providers they should have access to, I believe, moving forward. You'll be able to see within a specific CLS worksheet, each individual that is authorized within that worksheet. You'll be able to see the total service need based upon their CLS need after some of the other areas of support are removed. So walking through this particular CLS worksheet, it's been determined that there's 60 hours of total need. 7 of those are through natural supports. So that leaves the CLS authorization at 53 hours that would be provider provided. There's a number of different areas that we can walk through on worksheets related to the total CLS being authorized. But truly, this is intended to help assist the CMH staff, the CLS or the case managers that are authorizing CLS on the number of units. And we've got some things in the work that are going to hopefully improve the communication around that as well. Moving forward, the CLS site plan module will no longer be utilized. We are still going to have many of our shared staffing situations, but I think covered it a little bit earlier that that CLS invoice and site plan is no longer going to drive the reimbursement for a specific site. Right now, I'm going to unmute everybody and see if we have any questions on the general information we just rolled through before we turn it over to Laura to walk through some of the provider billing and claims information. And if anybody does have any questions, you can unmute yourself. All right, Laura, I think we can move on to the next section.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Previously, you were required to wait the full month before you could bill us in the system with the CLS invoices. And then starting with the new services, you'll be able to bill us more frequently. For those of you that have not billed in this fashion before, on the claim submission information, which will be on the left side of your screen, that menu item there, and then you'll start with the enter new claims. There actually is a Cricut help that is up in the top right corner. And at the very top of those options for resources, you'll see there's a training video. There is some documents. Some are shorter than the other ones, but I'd advise you, if you're not familiar with this at all, please go in and look at those and just get yourself familiar with that entry. And once you click into there and you've gotten to your authorization part of it and you have to enter, this is what it will look like for just one particular service line. And you'll see all the highlighted areas. Those are the things that you will have to make sure are filled in. And you're going to need to make sure that you're entering the correct modifier based on how many consumers are served at that site by your staff. As you see on that line, there is a copy function. So you can use that copy function to any days that might have the exact same hours. You can use that copy function and a calendar will show up for you. And it's just a click box into each of those days that would be the same. You can also use that and you can modify that service line too to help you save some entry.
All right, hi everyone, happy Friday. My name's Sarah, I'm from Washtenaw County, and I just wanted to go over just a couple scenarios that we put in here that we thought would be helpful when you guys start to do your billing, just to kind of like wrap your head around the new system and what's required. So for example, in scenario 1, this was just a day with 3 different consumers that are in the same site. So for one staff serving 3 consumers from 8 to 3, each consumer would need to have a claim line with the UP modifier for that time. And then if a staff takes one consumer to the park and the other 2 stay home from 3 to 4 p.m., then another claim line would need to be entered and 2 consumers would need to have the UN modifier. And then the one who went to the park would have the 1-to-1, which would just be a straight H2015 claim line. Then if one staff again served the 3 consumers from 4 to 9, you would have each consumer would need to have a claim line with the UP modifier again, just like the first one. And then if one staff providing the service has one consumer who's on one of the waivers and they receive overnight health and safety supports, the other 2 consumers do not receive that service from, let's say, 9 o'clock to 5 a.m., then this is where for 2 of the consumers, you would still have to use the UP because that shows 3 consumers served at that time under the H2015 UP. And then the one consumer would be the T27 UP for that claim line. That way then reimbursement is correct. Then going down into scenario 2, we wanted to give a little help because of the fact that we know that home help is no longer being deducted on the actual claim line, but we are reimbursing for the CMH responsibility for the CLS. We wanted to give a couple different scenarios for those situations. So for this example, a consumer receives 24 hours of total need, which includes home help services from the same provider. Your biller will need to bill for the full shift from 12 a.m. to 12 a.m., but only submit the claim for the units that the CMH is responsible for. So again, for example, if 20 hours, that would be the 80 units, are the CMH responsibility, but the remainder 4 hours are being reimbursed for help, you would need to submit a claim like the screenshot that's in front of you. So your times would still be 12 to 12, but then you would underbill on the units and you would do 80 units at the applicable rate. And James, will you scroll down to the next one? Scenario 3, again, is in regards to home help. But this is one that's not 24 hours. So again, consumer receives 6 hours of total need, which includes the home help service. But the CMH is only responsible for paying 4 of those hours of the day. Again, you would enter the full shift, which would be 12 to 6, and then you would underbill us on the units and charges to where it would literally be you are requesting payment for the CMH responsibility portion. You can go on to the next one. Scenario 4, we do know that there is an occasional enhanced rate or 2-on-1 staffing situations. So we did just want to show in those cases, the rate would be changed at the authorization level, which is where I highlighted it below. And then on the actual claim line for the 2-on-1 staffing claim example, you would put the applicable times, but then you would obviously bill us at the higher rate for those units for reimbursement for the 2-on-1 staffing. And then you can keep going, James. All right, and so then the next section, so this is the provider documentation requirements. So I know that there's been a lot of talk like for progress notes and how to document. So we did come up with a list of things that we would be looking for the requirements. Again, it'll be things like the staff name, date of service delivery, start and stop times, number of consumers served by staff, name and ID initials of the consumer served, IPOS activity, the identification of the overnight health and safety, the actual like written progress note of what occurred that day, and then of course the staff signature. We do have a template. Again, it's not mandatory to use our template, but there are a couple examples here that James is showing you that you're more than welcome to use. These are on the regional website as well. And that in order to help you, again, you don't have to use these, but we did just want to help give some type of document if you would like to use these. And you can see where it'll show you the applicable modifier based on how many consumers served. And then if it is an overnight health and safety, we even have that last section showing the T2027 and where you would submit for those hours.
And then on the other document, not sure, Sarah, if Deb, if you want to walk through this at all from Livingston, but there's another document here that is really probably more aligned with the billing requirements and helping the biller get information back from the direct care staff. So there's another example of a worksheet where you can identify the staff person and who they delivered service to, either in a shared or one-to-one for each of the sites, for each of the potential three staff on this worksheet. And there's an example of it on the second page of the worksheet, giving some times or giving some ideas on how this could help transition that information from the local CLS sites to the biller, who we know has to make sense of all this and get it into the system.
So right, we took a little different stance in that when we talked with our clinical staff, they said we really have plenty of documentation forms that we provide for the to provider staff. We don't need to change. They didn't really want to change those up too much. So we took the stance of what could be done so that we would just get that start and stop time billing information to the biller. So this doesn't have, where the X's are, we would anticipate probably a line. It wouldn't have to be an actual, XXX every 15 minutes or every half hour. We did it as a half hour to shrink it down to a 1-pager, but it would require for those partial, 15 minutes, as you can see on the example, that you would put in that time that service stopped on one line or in one service and then started up on the next one. So every tech is 2 units. So it's pretty easy to add up how many units in those time frames. If you're looking at X's, it's just add up the X's, multiply it by 2. And then of course, like in the first one, the 7:45 would only be 1 unit, not 2, because it's not a full half hour. And then the bottom part kind of gives a total of units for each, for shared, for one-on-one, and for overnight health and safety supports. And in this situation, it's a 24-hour with 3 8-hour shifts. So every shift adds up. No, however, they're, you know, even however the units are distributed between the 3 services, every shift adds up to 32 units, which is 8 hours. The bottom part really would probably only be helpful. Well, maybe not. I actually did a formula down here, but staff are probably going to be doing these by hand, so it's not going to really do much but for you. But I also put in the line where how many total minutes of home help was provided, and the 3 is actually just how many units that ends up being. So you're taking 45 minutes, dividing it by 15-minute units, and you get 3 of those, which would be how much home help you would deduct from your CLS billing, and round as needed. This is a first attempt for us. We're not going to know until people decide to try and use it. If it's good, bad, or horrible, we'll work with you though to help kind of revise it as needed. And let's see what. I know that maybe James or Laura, I know there was a question about, preponderance, but I think that we're not set up to do preponderance. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So there's some late guidance coming out from the state related to the specificity required around the modifiers. Right now, and what we anticipate moving forward with is that our reimbursement is going to be so tightly tied to the modifiers that it would be a disservice to the providers, to you all, to report with a preponderance, that you'd receive less revenue rather than individually identifying certain shared situations. So what we wanted to do was make sure the reimbursement aligned as close as it did before in the CLS site plans, with to at least cover the staff cost for each specific site. So when we're talking preponderance, there's some CMHs that might be going this way of if the individuals, if there's typically 2 individuals that live in a site that are served by 1 staff, that they would always be, those service claims would always have the I already forgot it. UN, I think, for 2 individuals being served at one time, no matter if one of those individuals was gone either to home or somewhere else that day. So the overall strategy for us, and to make sure that you all receive all the funds and revenue you need to deliver the services, is to require some of this more specific billing. So that's kind of where we're at with preponderance. Again, everything's always subject to whatever MDHHS can throw at us next. But that's basically where we're at to kick off this transition. And we'll have some time. We'll open it up for questions. And if anybody's interested, Laura set up a couple of sample consumers where we could walk through the training version of Cricut, and we'll share the screen and kind of show everybody what it looks like as we enter in some of these service claims in this new module. So moving forward, before we get to that, we did want to make the providers aware of all of the reports that we're working to make available to you all. The first one we wanted to make you aware of is the provider census report. So this report lists all of the consumers at each specific CLS site. So in this example, you'll see there's two consumers at test site 9781, and it shows their hours that they're authorized, shows their hours of home help, and shows what their individual authorizations are at each site. So this is available as you move through Cricut by selecting authorizations and selecting CLS site census. And then you can search for individuals that are assigned to your agency, either by their site name or consumer name.
James,
So, yeah.
sorry, I just wanted to add too real quick, that if you click on the left side, I mean, obviously this isn't a transition guide, but when you guys are in Cricut, if you click on the consumer's number, that'll actually take you right over into the consumer's chart, which is really nice. If you need to see who the case manager is or any other information within the chart, it'll take you right there. And then over to the right on the view next to the approved, it takes you directly to that worksheet that we were just talking about. So you can actually look and see how those numbers with the hours, how they were calculated. And if something seems incorrect, if you have a different number for your home help or anything like that, that would be a trigger, just like before, for you to reach out to your clinical staff to look into those hours just to ensure that everything's being calculated correctly.
Yep. All right. Thank you, Sarah. Moving forward, we're hoping to continue to build up this system a bit and improve the communication within the system related to when you guys need to request some additional units, or there's some conversation that needs to occur around specific CLS or other service authorizations. So we hope to have some information to everyone on that shortly. So moving forward, everyone should have access to that report if you have the appropriate authorization access. You should be able to see that within your Cricut access. We are also moving forward. If you don't, please reach out to your CMH contact, and they can work with the Cricut liaison, and we can make sure to get anybody access that needs access. Another area we wanted to cover is we've come up with a solution to allow providers to access kind of some ad hoc reporting tools within the system. And we're going to be able to allow providers to run kind of their own reports, their own custom reports based upon some of the reporting elements that we have built into the system. So right off the get-go, we have 2 reports available. You can get to them by first going to reports and downloads. If you don't see reports and downloads, that'll be another request to your CMH SB contact, and they'll be able to get you the appropriate user access. Everything's locked down for individuals based upon each individual user ID. So we do have to give some permissions along the way as we expand some access to reporting services. So the first report in reporting services is 1020C, the provider authorization report for external providers. So you're going to be able to run a report based upon a start date, a stop date. You can add in a case number if you want to see a case number. You can add in a CPT code if you're only interested about seeing CLS authorizations. You can see just H2015 CLS authorizations moving forward. And then you're going to be able to export that report in Excel, PDF, a couple other different options. CSV files, so if you're importing it into any local spreadsheets, you could use that as well. So this report, I think I have this one. I have the next one pulled up, so we'll walk through that in a minute. The second report we have is just related to provider claims. So with the provider claims report, 1002C, you should be able to see it. It'll look like that green box first, and then you'll be able to click in, and there's a data dictionary and a couple other sheets within the report as well. So within provider claims, you'll be able to see all of the claims that are submitted within your vendor. So each provider has a vendor that their sites sit within, and you'll be able to enter a start and stop time, individual case numbers or no case numbers if you want to see all of the claims submitted on behalf of your organization. And then again, for CPT code, you could put in specific CPT codes, or you could just see everything that you've been reimbursed for within the time period you select. So this will give status on the claims. I'll flip over really quick just to show people what one of the outputs of the reports looks like. So we just pulled Renaissance as the example, and you'll get an export that'll look like this, where you'll be able to see the claim ID number, what batch it's in, the batch status. So you can see what's sitting in adjudicated, what's sitting in paid or sent to GL, the number of units that are charged. So that's what you submitted as a claim, the number paid, CPT code, modifier, service date, and then service start and stop time. And then you'll be able to see the individual's insurance eligibility as we move forward. So as we, and then the last is place of service, some of the other things that are entered within the claim itself. So you might not need all of the information, but there's a lot of good information, and we're given all the claim details. You'll also have a second sheet of the worksheet that will total up all of the reimbursement at that time for the organization, and give a summary of those claims that are on your first detailed page. And then thirdly, there's Jessica, our statistician and report writer, always does a data dictionary with all of her reports. So if you have a question on any of the fields, there's always going to be a data dictionary page in all of our report exports. So from this, if you have further questions on a report, you can always reach out to your CMH contact as well. All right.
Can I say something real quick, Gene?
Yep.
Not just question, but if there's something that could be added to the report that would make your lives a lot easier, please do let your CMH contact know.
That's a great point, Jessica. We're starting all the providers off with a couple reports as long as we have access. So the first thing we want to do is provide access to the reports. So if you click in to your, and you don't have reports and downloads available, or you don't have reporting services available, or any of these specific reports aren't in your, once you get through those two steps, if you don't have any reports there, please contact your CMH contact, because we'll be able to assign those privileges to any user that you feel needs that access and would be beneficial to your provider net organization. And Jessica makes a great point. We're rolling out with 2 reports to start with. If there's something that you'd love to see in the system, whether it would be something related to the CLS worksheets or any other information that you would find helpful with any of the fields really that exist in the system, if you have any ideas, please don't be shy about sending those to your CMH, and we'll see what we can do to hopefully make your lives a little bit easier if we have some report that we can create that would be beneficial. With that, that's the end of the presentation part. I'm gonna open up the floor for some questions. So feel free to unmute yourself. Feel free to send a message within the chat box, If you go to more and click chat, you can send a message either to everyone or just to myself, and we'll turn it over for questions at this point.
I just have a quick question. So going back and discussing the changes in the service codes or the modifiers, particularly regarding the H201X service code, could you please elaborate a little bit more on how or when a staff member would claim this service? I noticed while looking up in consumers authorizations today that they've replaced the CLS service code. But when I was looking into the description that I saw, it almost seemed as if they're only supposed to utilize this during the nighttime.
Yep. So here's the rundown on the H201X. So that H201X will allow you to claim either H2015 or T2027. So what we didn't want to do was have to be continually altering the T2027 authorization and directly authorizing that, as well as the H2015 authorization, because we understand that individuals are going to sleep on different schedules. Really, our intent is to authorize the H201X for the total number of units that would be accounted for with the H2015 and the T2027. So the T2027 should only be used while an individual is sleeping. And that range, they started with hour ranges. They started with kind of all kinds of different requirements related to that utilization of that service code. But what we ended up with is that we'll just authorize H201X. You'll never claim just H201X. You'll always claim either H2015 or T2027 up to whatever the total units that are available.
Thank you for explaining that.
Yep.
James, this is Shar. One thing I thought might be worth mentioning, just maybe for those that haven't billed H2015 before, is it is a 15-minute code. And so what that means is a unit has to be 15 minutes. So like 1 to 14 minutes would not be billable. But I believe that is relaxed right now because of COVID. Is that, I have to confirm that or to make sure, because I don't know how long that was going to be extended, but we may want to either maybe add that to this document or.
Yep, sure. We'll give an update in the FAQ on that. We do have quite a moving provider manual of what's allowed and what's not allowed right now, especially with all the executive orders coming in and out of legality and some of the waiver changes that are technically still outstanding from the feds. So yep, we can make sure we give an update to everyone on that. We did have a question that came through in the chat. Are there going to be more than 50 lines available in each claim? Sarah, I think the answer is no at this point still. The claims module is shared across PCE, across many of their customers. So we end up kind of with some limitations when we're sharing a product across so many different PHPs and CMHs. And right now, one of those standard limits is that claims line.
I believe it's an 837 restriction.
So it's not even PCE. I can't even blame it
It
on
is,
them.
no, it is not PCE.
Yeah.
Well, and that's why we kind of recommended, obviously no less, but weekly billing, weekly, bi-weekly, whichever would be helpful for you guys. Just because there is that restriction, it will only let you do the 50 claim lines.
Yep, and we do want to continue to note that that was an area of concern with our previous model, and was one of the reasons we made a change towards this, was that you all as providers would have to wait the entire month, delivering service an entire month, sometimes 2.5, 3 payrolls until you could submit for reimbursement. So while we don't want a service claim every day, at the end of the day when services happen, we do think we'll be able to reimburse more frequently. We're still trying to maintain our processing schedules and pay as quickly as possible. But I think that is something important to note, that there's no longer going to be that full month delay until you get to the end of the month with the CLS invoice. Anything else on the 50 lines or anything else there, Sarah or Laura? No, okay. The next question we have through the chat is for the T2027, can that be used as the average time they are sleeping, or does it have to be exactly when they sleep? I think we'll go to the exact definition when we do that, but it's with the, I think the average is going to be okay. That's not going to need to be done on a exact basis, as they're both coming out of the same authorization. But correct me if I'm wrong, Sarah or Laura, or anybody else. And we'll make sure we give kind of final answers within the FAQ document that we release. So if there's something we don't know the answer on, we're gonna we'll kind of relay that we're gonna seek out further guidance either from the state or any of the additional documentation that we're starting to receive. Next up, Sarah, this one might be you. Are we able to lump all home help time for the day, or does it have to be broke up throughout the day with different start and stop times?
Honestly, I think it just depends on if there is a start and stop. I mean, if you literally serve just one consumer from 12 to 12 and that's how that, then you're more than welcome. I mean, yes, you would just do like the one example and bill under. But if there's a break in the day, anything like that, if you serve someone from 1 to 2 and then not again until 5 to 6, yes, the times and everything will need to be accurate.
All right, next is a question from Sharon Porter. Is there a date for when all the auths will be updated for the new code? So we're working pretty quickly to try and get this done, real understanding that we still have a lot of fiscal year 20 services that are coming in to be billed. We do have a report that is very specific, that shows when the old authorization has been moved over to the new authorization. So the CMHs are monitoring that tightly. I'm not sure we have an exact date at this point, but I'll get with all 4 of the CMHs and try and see if we can get that out to everybody. I imagine our target is to be done as soon as possible, if not already. But we'll definitely want to be done so that you guys are going to be able to bill there pretty shortly. So there might be a little bit of a lag at the beginning, as much as I was touting the lack of having to wait a month for reimbursement. Here at the beginning during this transition, it might be a little bit slower. Moving forward, once all the authorizations are fixed, that might be where we don't have to wait as long to submit claims. Moving on to the next question. We have a few sites that have 2 consumers, and sometimes we have 2 caregivers on the site, and sometimes we have 1 caregiver on the site. Are we using the UN modifier for all hours, just a different rate, or is there no UN modifier when there is one-on-one care? So the modifiers are, Sarah, are you gonna take this one?
I thought you were gonna take
I
it.
can.
I'll take it. You want me to take it, and then you correct me if I'm wrong.
All right.
So again, if it is one-on-one, so if you have 2 staff to 2 consumers and it's one-on-one, yes, it would just be the H2015 because they're receiving one-on-one care. But then if you're flipping to where there's one, maybe for 5 hours, there's 1 staff to the 2 consumers, then during those 5 hours, you would need to have that using the UN modifier for those 2 consumers. Is that what you're going to say, James?
Yeah.
Okay.
essentially we're basing the modifiers more on the staff than the living situation of the individual. So if one staff is delivering service to one person, then there's no modifier required. When there's one staff delivering to two people, that's when you'd use the UN. So if you had two caregivers on site, each serving an individual themselves, that would not require the UN modifier, and you get reimbursed the one-to-one rate with the no modifier rate for each of those individual staff. Question from Beth Rose. We were told by other PIHPs that the T2027 needs to be used between 8 p.m. and 8 a.m. and must be noted within the IPOS. Is our region implementing that rule? Laura or Sarah, what's the latest on the, I think this one's went back and forth a little bit, but is the 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. still in effect?
That's the ruling, is that the T2027 can only happen between 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. But it is potentially, it could differ from consumer to consumer what that time frame is. And that's what would be noted in the IPOS.
Yep, so we will be noting it in the IPOS. There's definitely been some conversation around different sleeping schedules for individuals and what's truly overnight and what's I mean, the code is intended to cover an individual's health and safety while sleeping, where they don't need direct guidance, assistance, prompting related to a service. All right. The chat is empty right now for questions. Do we have any other questions within the chat, or any other questions anybody wants to cover verbally?
I have a question regarding the staff verification checklist. Okay, so the 15-minute verification seems to be the standard that we're going to need to follow, because any of the verifications that we've looked at that has progress notes associated, we're going to have to take these out of programs to review them. So if there's any listing of any type over program notes on this sheet, we're not able to take it out of program, because that would walk a recipient rights line if I believe removing that. So the standard may be that we're just going to have a separate checklist done by the staff so that we can remove that, where it's not indicating any other services provided to the individual. That's my understanding. I'm not sure.
Yeah, and we'll check in with rights on that too. Yeah, this, and we're providing a couple templates that we thought might be useful. We definitely don't want to get into your provider business of how you're documenting. We're just hoping to provide some assistance if it is needed. We'd love to see what providers are using. If you're willing to share with other providers, we're just hoping to make it as efficient as possible for everyone. But we realize, yeah, there's definitely some requirements, and I think that's why Livingston has a little bit of a different situation that they presented, where their documents are less about progress notes and more about assistance to document verification wise for the biller on the initial claim, and then keeping some more of that individual service notes back at the site. So appreciate the question, and we'll follow up again with rights just to kind of get that line and just make sure we can provide some of that information moving forward. Another question came in on the chat. I'm sorry I missed the exact answer on how often we're allowed to submit claims now. We'd like it to be no more than weekly. We are moving definitely away from the monthly claim requirement that we had prior, but we'd prefer that batches come in at no frequently than weekly, no more frequently than weekly. So that's kind of what we're hoping for, just to keep some of those batch just a number of batches to a manageable level. We still are hoping that we can get most of the batches for a specific site or most of the claims for a specific site for everyone at the site submitted within one batch. That'll kind of help us process those claims. And I think it'll help everybody keep some semblance of an understanding of where they came from. Sarah, Laura, anything on that, or are we good on that one?
Good.
All right. Any other questions before we move into? We can do a quick little walkthrough. Laura's gonna just walk through a claim being submitted live within the training system. Another one came in. Do you have to submit weekly? You don't have to. We just wanted to make it available so you could do every 2 weeks. You can do monthly still if you still wanted to do monthly as well.
But
We were just
remember that you only have the 50 claim line
yeah.
a hold on you, but yeah, if you wanted to do a full month, that'd be okay.
Yeah, I think we were looking at probably 2 weeks being the sweet spot around the claim lines and the availability of those. Monthly, it could get a little bit difficult to fit all of those in a batch with the different staffing levels and modifiers.
I have a question, please. Actually, I submitted them. I'm not sure if you could see them. But with the documentation that needs to be given to CMH, how will we be able to get it to CMH? Are we going to be able to upload it electronically to see the shifts, or how's that going to work?
Sarah, are we talking, do you think Terry's talking about the sites?
Well, if it's like the actual progress note and documentation, we would request it at the time of audit, and depending on what information is on there can be emailed, or obviously if it's got consumer code names, you would need to fact, we do the normal process. That hasn't changed.
Oh, okay. Okay, I didn't know if we were going to have to submit differently now. And my other question was on the where we could click on the sheet of where we can use the worksheet on converting units. With each consumer, the authorization ends differently. So how is the rounding going to go with that? Because we've been trying to be proactive and figure it out. And I was just wondering how that worked, or is that all broken down? I have not looked, in the documentation today, but I was just wondering.
So with the worksheet, it just helps give the weekly unit. So in the one example, it was 212 units. Our clinicians will take that information over into the direct authorization. And with the way Cricut works is they would put in, if let's say your IPOS is, again, it could be June to, whichever, or maybe it's just a 6-month authorization. When you put those dates in and our clinicians will put 212 in a frequency of weekly, it will multiply that based on the dates that are inputted in the system, on how many units and the frequency, and it gives you that number. So the worksheet is just to help get that weekly, and the authorization on the direct consumer chart module, that is where it really does, it'll take that math based on the dates that are put for the auth. Does that, I'm right, James? I'm pretty sure that's
yep.
how, yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, we got another question that came through in the chat. Will the overnight T2027 have the same rate as the H2015? Yes. So all those rates will be the same. We're not doing a lesser rate for the T2027. We wouldn't expect your staff to be paid less, I guess. So we'd want to make sure we cover your staffing costs. Another question came in. Do we need to submit all documentation with the claims or bills that come in? We're not doing any additional documentation requirements at this time. So we're not requiring any uploads of progress notes. It would all be if we selected you for a Medicaid verification audit, or if there's some sort of audit that went that needed some more information. So documentation isn't required to be submitted within the claim. Any other questions before we move into sampling some of the claims? All right, so if you missed any of the answers, or if we didn't, I think there was a couple that we were going to follow up on. We've been logging the questions. We're going to put those out in a frequently asked questions document. Please make sure you send any questions to us. Your local CMH contract contact, your billers, whoever you reach out to, they can get the questions to us. Because we can get them into the frequently asked questions document, and then hopefully provide a little bit, put some information out that everyone can access, rather than all of us having to ask questions and answer questions back and forth. So Laura, I'm gonna, to clarify, we should be using something like the sample sheets shown today. I think our big element is that we just want to make sure that the elements or the fields that we need to pay attention to, that we'd access for a Medicaid service verification audit, that you have documentation either in a single document, multiple documents, somewhere you're keeping track of all this information that's on the screen right now. Because that's the elements that the Office of Inspector General would look at. That's what they would expect us to look at when we're doing a Medicaid verification. So in some semblance, those items need to be tracked, and we'll follow up a little bit with recipient rights on just what we should be keeping within the site versus what's okay to be transitioned over to the biller staff. So the staff names, date of service delivery, start-stop times, number of consumers served. Some of that might come from a reporting document that's a little bit more like the Livingston model. And then we have the other document that kind of combines most of these elements into the single sheet. But providers should be keeping records just to protect yourselves. The OIG is becoming much more involved in the behavioral health side of audits. We often find they might not understand our services as much as they understand the medical side. And so I think to protect all providers, I think you all should make sure that you're documenting and that there's a clear linkage to all the reimbursement to the services provided. So something should be used. You don't necessarily have to use our documents. All right, any other questions before we move over to Laura walking through a service claim submission? Thank you for all of the questions. We definitely appreciate them, and we will try to respond as quickly as possible to any additional questions that come in. Sarah, or Laura, I'm going to turn it over to you. Sorry, Sarah, I'm not giving you you don't have to do this part. I'm going to stop sharing.
Okay, here's what you should see when you're logging in. Once you've logged in, on the left side here, you can see a claim submission, like we showed in the document, and then we have enter new claims. You would need to know the consumer numbers, And then once you search for that individual, and it's decided it's not going to work for me. So let's see if I can pull up a batch that I worked on yesterday with these individuals. And this was a test one that I was working on. And so if you've ever started a claim and you needed to add more information into it, you just did 1 day's worth, you want to add the next day's, you can totally work that route. You're just going to go to view all batches and claims, and you're going to see the batch number. Then you can go into the claims itself and you can click the change button. And this is it. Up here is the authorization information. As you can see here, it's the TO1 H21X, and you can view rates by just clicking that button and it will pop up there. Again, this is just all sample data. And here I added someone with a T27. I just went with the route of starting with the start of the day where they were using the T27. And then once they were out of that, they were into working with another consumer at that time. And then I did reduce the units here because they had some type of home help during this time frame. So that's why the hours don't match the units. And again, this is someone that is all day. And then at the end of the day, they went back into the T2027. If you needed to add more lines, you just add the information here. If you want to copy a particular line, you click the copy function. And as you can see, a grid pulls up and you're just going to select whatever days may be exactly the same, or they could be a little different. Once you click on there, you click on create detail lines. And it just copied those days over that you selected. Now those days are editable. So if you needed to change a particular time, maybe they were done at 11, you can do that. You can change your dollar amount, your charges here. You just have to click in a different amount. And you can change your units. Once you're done for that day, make sure that you save whenever you're entering. And it's going to tell you if you have a number of units that are under. It's going to let you know and give you an error. Just letting you know, hey, just so you know, the hours that you entered don't match the units. And in this case, it's okay because we left off the home help hours. And then you just hit save again, and now I've got another warning. And I just have a number. I just put any number in here for the amount of money, so it's a little off on there. And since it's not the 19th yet, it won't let you enter that either. So again, you're seeing lots of errors that we normally have that can come up while you're entering it. Right there, I just cleared the line by clicking here, and I cleared that whole line out. So I'm able to save this one. And I'm going to go back in and see if it will let me enter. So here's when it is able to pull up. You see their authorization. You're going to enter a HCFA 1500. Again, you have the authorization line on top. And this is where you enter the dates. That will copy over, be the same day, so you'll be able to do that. This is the place of service. In most instances, you're at home, which is a place of service of 12. And in this case, it's an H201X. So you're going to need to make sure that you change that code because you won't be able to bill against that. So H2015, you can enter any of the modifiers that are needed. UN for 2, and then put your charges and units in. I don't know if anybody has any requests of anything else they might want to see.
Laura, there was a couple.
I have a question, please.
Yes.
I'm sorry. When you go into the inner HCFA 1500 claim,
Yes.
if we bill weekly, do we enter a new batch each week, or do we continue with the batch that we started for that person for that month?
Yep, I can show you that. So when you enter it,
Mm-hmm.
there's a drop-down box right here. So if you don't change it, it's going to pull into the same batch that you have open, or you can ask it to do a new batch and it will put it in a new batch for you.
Okay, so if we bill weekly, should we do a new batch each? Should we do a new batch each time we bill?
If you're talking about, doing a batch and wanting to submit it, then as soon as you're done with it, you're going to go through the whole process and actually submit it. And then when you go back in, you won't be able to see that batch any longer because that will be sent to the CMH.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Makes sense. But if you want to do things weekly and maybe you don't want to send every other week, or maybe you even do something daily, that's an option for you, that you can go back into that batch and you're just adding more information to it. Or you can start a new batch, either or.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, and Laura, a couple questions came through on the chat. We have to deduct home help ourselves. It will not be done automatically. That's correct.
Yep.
We're only going to be billing CLS services. So that will need to be, essentially that shouldn't be billed to us. We want the time to be deducted as well. You can kind of bill the time period where the home help services were delivered. And that's kind of where Sarah showed in one of those examples, the reduction of maybe a half hour if there was a half hour of home help. And we all know that the home help doesn't really occur on 15-minute bases all the time. The hand over hand assistance could be 5 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute. It's just kind of a relic in our system and something we're stuck with, trying to figure out a way to make sure you guys are reimbursed for all the appropriate services. So I would say just get that as close as possible. But that's correct. We definitely don't want you billing for home help, as we're not the paying source of it. So that's where we're trying to draw a little bit clearer of a line than we've had in the past related to the staffing time that we were billing previously.
Oh, sorry, James.
Yep, you can go, Sarah.
I was just going to say, I think the better way to look at it is you're billing us for what the CMH is responsible for. So instead of trying to do this point to point and then it gets super complicated for you, the CMH is saying that they're only going to, pay, it's $20 a week or 20 hours a week, and then you divide that. So it's technically 5 hours a day. That's what you should be submitting to us for the payment. But we do understand that somebody may be there for 6 hours because they're doing home help tasks as well. But us as a CMH, we are not reimbursing the home help. We're only reimbursing that 5 hours. So I don't know if that helps, but that's kind of more, that was a better way to kind of look at it, even when I was testing a lot with it.
All right, and then we have another question that came in. So it sounds as though we have to calculate what we charge in dollar amounts, and it will not do it for us based on the rate.
That's correct. They were used to, yeah, with the invoice before, James, they were used to did it automatically for them. So.
And that's more of the typical billing. I guess for CLS providers, you haven't seen that in typical claims. because we've had our CLS invoice that was a little bit different and more of a separate module than the rest of our services. All right, any other questions?
I did want to show another option or feature to you. If you ever have a claim that gets sent back to you and you need to change something on it, maybe there's something wrong with that, you can actually move it from a batch that's existing and put it into a new batch. That claim batch is there when you go in to change it. And you can do that, and now this will be in a new batch on its own. As you can see, it's been removed. So sometimes that might happen when you have an error on a particular person, but you still want to be able to process payment on the person that is clean. And someone might tell you to move it to a different batch. That's an option for you. Here's where James talked about the reports and downloads, and then reporting services. And these are the ones that pull in for you. And again, all of this information is in this help menu in the claims area here. Anything else?
I don't see any more questions that have came in through the chat. Does any of the staff from the CMHs have anything additional to add, or the PHP, anything that we missed? All right, do any of the provider staff have any further questions?
Is this Zoom recording going to be emailed out to all of us?
Yep, we're gonna post this. I'm assuming YouTube, and we'll send a link out to everyone. We'll also continue to send out an updated guide, and we'll answer all those questions that were outstanding after the meeting as soon as we can get to them.
Thank you.
All right. Hearing no further questions, I want to thank you all for spending a Friday afternoon with us. And again, thank you for all the work you do. And apologies on another transition. We're hoping to not transition every 2 or 3 years. So hopefully this future proofs us a little bit more. And we're interested in moving forward with the 835s as much as possible. And there might be some other system edits that we can make in the future to help make your jobs more efficient. But thank you, everyone, and hope you have a nice weekend.
Thanks, James.